Katherine Freund, and I'm the founder of a national nonprofit organization called ITNAmerica. And I brought you some numbers today. Three things I'm going to do. Quickly talk about what is the need, talk about what is ITNAmerica, and talk about our needs as we age. So these are a couple numbers, and I took these numbers from a U.S. Senate Resolution 851 passed last year that congratulated ITNAmerica on the occasion of passing 1 million rides, and I brought you data from those 1 million rides. So in broad strokes, 25% of the population is going to be over 65 by the year 2060. So that's just about double what we have now. People outlive their decision to stop driving by about 10 years. For men, it's 6.7. For women, it's 11.1, but there's more women than men. And 75% of the over 65 population lives in rural and suburban areas that lack the density for traditional mass transit. In broad numbers, 80% of the population of the United States lives in 5% of the land area, so the other 95% of the land area is some kind of a transportation desert. So everybody talking about transportation for urbanized areas, but most of the country is not urbanized, and so that's a very, very big problem. And so the unmet needs of people who live in areas that don't have good transportation system include social isolation, diminished quality of life, limited access to health care, and a significant strain on families and caregivers. So ITNAmerica is a national nonprofit, and we were, the first ride was given in 1995. We support transportation services for older people and people with visual impairments across the country. We also do social research, and we work in public policy and in education. That's a picture. There aren't enough dots up there to represent what we do, but that's enough dots, I think. We have a national website and searchable online database that I just want to make you aware of. It has over 15,000 transportation services for older people and people with visual impairments. So it's free, it's searchable, and for those who cannot search, you may call a toll-free number and someone will search it for you and tell you what the transportation services are in your community or for your parents, okay? So these are the characteristics of the Independent Transportation Network. And I just want to begin by saying this. When I started working on this, I didn't know anything about software, I didn't know anything about technology, I didn't know anything about social enterprise. I just tried to think through what's the problem and how do we address it. And as Alan said, the problem is not older people. And when I started working on this, that's what everybody said. How do we test these older drivers and get them off the road? And I said, wrong question. People are aging normally, transportation system is broken. Okay, so we figure out what are the dignified alternatives for people so they can make good choices, and we do not tell people what they cannot do, and we do not back people into a corner, because when you do that, what they tell you is, get out of my life, go away, right? It doesn't solve any problems. So we created a transportation service, and I give you a tiny bit of detail on this because this is where the numbers came from. We created a transportation service that used automobiles, not vans or buses. We're talking 1995. Nobody did this. We said the service has to recreate the comfort and convenience of the mobility people have when they have cars. So it has to be available 24 hours a day. It has to be available for any purpose. We are not going to make value judgments on the worthiness of people's rides. We're not going to say you're old, you only get to go to the doctor or church or the supermarket, okay? We're just not going to do any of that stuff. So we built a software system to do this, and some of these presentations today were just fascinating to me. We did ride share by ride segment. Our software has that. We managed demand. I'm going to say something unorthodox now, and that is, I don't think older people really care very much about mobility on demand. What we did was we said, all right, we'll give you a ride on demand if you want it, but it's going to cost you more money. And if you will voluntarily plan your ride in advance, we're going to give you a discount. And if you'll share your ride, we're going to give you a discount. As a result, 97% of the rides are voluntarily scheduled in advance. People will always share if we can find them a match, and nobody complains. And the reason is it's a free consumer choice. We're not telling people what they have to do. We're giving them options and letting them make their own choices. So we built a software system for this, and this is the last thing I'll say about it. In addition to those innovations, we built the software, which turned out to be a transportation network, but we did it as a nonprofit. And that freed us from being profit-driven. All the networking companies only process cash and they only use credit cards. But because we weren't interested in making a profit, it liberated us to look at assets in many forms. So we said, what about these really valuable automobiles you're no longer driving? Would you like to trade those cars to pay for your rides? Everybody said, you're crazy, Catherine, nobody's going to do this. It turns out it's okay to be crazy. People do it, they love it, they trade their cars for rides, so we get these automobiles off the road. Then we also said, what's the largest expense in transportation? It's drivers, it's labor. And because we're a nonprofit, we can use volunteers. And people, I want to show of hands if I may. If I asked you all if you would give an older person a ride if they needed it, would you please raise your hand? Right, okay, that's social capital, folks. Okay, so we built a system where if you volunteer to drive someone else, we give you a credit in the system, and we store it in an economic instrument we created called a personal transportation account. Okay, so we looked at assets differently, we looked at rideshare differently, we looked at automobiles differently, and we created a service that has a satisfaction rating between 95 and 98%. Okay, so a lot of this translates to automated vehicles because it's a vehicle you can do anything you want with if you need it. Okay, so these are the different ways you can put resources into your personal transportation account. Now I'm up to the data because I really don't want to run out of time. This is what older people choose to do when they have a free choice. And for those of you who are visually impaired, I'm going to skip to the next slide and tell you the numbers. Medical rides, about 40%. Shopping, about 23%. Having fun, about 10%. Work or volunteer, 7.5%. Socialize, 6.5%, et cetera, et cetera. All different kinds of things. It's a lot more than going to the doctor. And the most popular ride, get your hair done. It is. It's #1 across the country. And these numbers are national, okay? They come from, I believe, 24 communities. And they go from California to Maine and to Florida. These are the customer satisfaction ratings. People love this, and who wouldn't, okay? Now I'm going to give you the numbers on the people who are using the service. So this is based on 1 million rides from 1996 to April of 2018. So you've got, I'll just go over a couple of the numbers. Almost 60% of the people who use this service are over 85. Okay, it was a big, big, big surprise to us. The most common age is 90. I don't have the percent up here, but 58% of these people are living alone in the community. Right? 75% self-report good health. 3/4 are women. If you ask me, this is successful aging. This is staying in your home. This is making your own choices. This is using a service that takes you where you want to go, when you want to go. And it is about not being dependent. Now here are the special needs categories. Because we built software for older people and for people with visual impairment, we built categories for all the different kinds of special needs. I'll read these again. Alzheimer's, anxiety disorder, bladder disorder, blind, cane, deaf, driver assistance required, 14.5%. Please remember that. Need a full-size vehicle, 3%. Can't get into a high vehicle, almost 11%. Need a personal assistant, 2.5%. Have a service animal, less than 1%. Need a trunk in the car, that's for wheelchairs and folding walkers. Visual impairment, almost 14%. So only 1.5% say they're blind, but really the people who are saying they're visually impaired, they have very limited vision. And 1 out of 5 uses a walker, and about 5% use a wheelchair. These are all the different kinds of special needs. And in terms of automated vehicles, this is just my opinion, there are so many things that older people with special needs need that need a human being to help them. Yay! You can move your walker into an automated vehicle, but you can't carry your groceries, okay? You can move your folding walker into the vehicle, but you can't fold the walker and lift it yourself. You can wheel your wheelchair, but you can't fold your wheelchair and lift it yourself. There are all these things that people need help with. I just can't tell you how many people I have myself driven and I escort them. We escort people door through door and arm through arm. I can't tell you how many people I see tapping the curb with their toe because they can't see it and they don't want to fall down. There's just a lot of special needs, and people need arm through arm and door through door. So there's your numbers on gender, and there's your numbers on living alone. There's your health status. It's pretty much a bell curve. Now we ask people about driving, because when you're not used to dealing with the aging population, you tend to think that you drive until the day you don't, and then somebody has this conversation with you and tells you why you shouldn't be driving anymore, or maybe your doctor does, and then that's the end of it. And ladies and gentlemen, that is not what happens. That's a myth. The transition from the driver's seat to the passenger seat is about 10 years. And during that period of time, you begin using alternatives. And so with automated vehicles, I think people might continue to drive some of the time and use an alternative some of the time. And about 25% of the people who use ITN are still driving when they join the service, but they are not driving at the end. They make a voluntary transition because they have a dignified alternative that allows them to stay mobile and live in their homes and be independent and have the dignity of making their own choices and not being told what to do. Just independence lives in choice, in choice. Even if they're not good choices, if you make them yourself, you feel better. So this is the income of people who use our service, and surprisingly enough, more than 40% have an income of less than $25,000 a year, but over 6% have an income of over $100,000 a year. So there's quite a range, but it skews toward lower income. It is not diverse. It is a voluntary service. I wish it were more diverse, but those are the numbers, and those are the numbers. These are just a few quick characteristics of the people who volunteer, and this represents 1 year of data. We do volunteer customer satisfaction surveys every year, but the reason I put it up here is that these are older drivers as well. These are older people. And so what emerges is they have a much higher education level. Look at this, 11% are a doctor, a PhD, or a lawyer. For that 12-year-old who wants to be a lawyer, that's where he's going to be. There are also very different comparisons to national volunteer data. We have a lot more men, we have a lot more people who are retired, we have a lot more people who are married. So the characteristics of the people who volunteer to drive, and I think when the automated vehicles come, they're going to be the volunteer escorts. And I think they're going to love it. And that human interaction is going to be important. But what emerges is a picture of the young old helping the old, and the more affluent helping the less affluent. And I think it's a pretty nice picture and says a nice thing about people. These are the reasons to volunteer, and here's your social capital. So we've been gathering these data. Everybody who volunteers and everybody who uses the service signs an application and an informed consent that we can have their data for research. I forgot to say this, we built this research database under it, so we have 172 fields of data on everything we do. So we got a lot of information. And this has been the intake for volunteers for over 20 years, and you can see that people do this because they want to help other people. And my 2 cents is this is what Uber and Lyft are missing. They're just doing everything. You know the other motivations? I mean, what matters most to us in our lives? Well, money matters, right? But what about love? Measure that. What about family? What about neighborhood? What about community? We all do the really important things in our life for these intangible, immeasurable things. Those are social capital. And so a nonprofit, I would posit that a nonprofit social enterprise solves a lot of transportation problems better than for-profit solutions solve them. So this is where we're going. I'm almost done. This is where we're going from here. We've learned a lot. I just turned 69. I started this when I was 39. I'm very determined to take what we've learned and get it out into the world because we are serving a lot of people, but the population is aging so fast. I always feel like I'm being buried in unmet need while I work, you know? So we really have to scale. In scaling, you have to drop your costs. You have to make your technology reachable by many, many, many people. So that 95% of the country, that land area that doesn't have much, that's what we're shooting for. Because the government has not been able to solve that problem, and Uber and Lyft aren't going to solve it either. But I believe we're going to take our technology, we're going to rebuild it on Salesforce. Esri has donated all our algorithms for the whole country. So we're going to have processing in the cloud for everything we're doing, all that ride matching and routing. And it's going to make what we're doing nonprofit, dirt cheap for the little guys who don't have technology in the little towns. And essentially what we're going to do is we're going to make it possible for rural America to create do-it-yourself volunteer transportation networks. But because it's going to be on one platform, everybody's going to be connected. And those are the guys who are helping us, and that's what it is. And there's one more meeting coming up if anybody's interested. This is my one plug, Ellen. If anybody's interested in working on this, there's a meeting in Washington next week. If you're interested, please come and see me, and we'll include you. Okay? Thank you very much.